Okay, we're going to start up again. This is Scott Izu and Amit Chaudhry's back here. And if you guys, however you want to do this, if you want to each go for a little while, and you kind of open it up.
Okay. So, yeah, like she said, I'm Scott Izu. I work full-time at eBay. And I'm going to do a little bit of a different kind of format for my talk and just share a little bit about my story. So hopefully in my story you'll hear some of the different technologies that you can work with. And if you have questions on that, feel free. I'll take any questions like that. But really what I'm thinking, I'm kind of the person who drives down First Street and sees all these office buildings and asks myself, what do all these people do, right? So I'm hoping to also answer the question of where you guys are at in life, trying to think back to my early college days and think, how do you connect the dots? And Steve Jobs, who everybody knows Steve Jobs, right? No? Okay. If you're in this class, should know who Steve Jobs is. But what he said was, at the end of his life, he said, looking back, it all made sense how the pieces fit together and how the dots connected. But going forward, he never knew what the steps would lead. And so I'm going to go way back. For me, school was not always an easy thing for me. Way back in 4th grade, they started to notice that I had some speech issues and reading issues, right? So I was brought out of class trying to do speech therapy and different things to try to get caught up. And that kind of caught up with me. 6th grade, I got held back. And what I found is just kind of a soundbite for you. In every defeat, in every victory, find a defeat. It'll keep you humble. In every defeat, find a victory. It'll keep you hopeful. And so when I got held back in 6th grade, a lot of what I got was, you're just not good enough, right? That's what that told me. And what I found was, even though my English wasn't that good, I was fortunate enough to be able to continue in my math. Wherever I was placed at my math, they had this thing where you could continue. Like if you were like on letter G, you could continue on H the next year. So I continued on in math, and I found out that math was actually one of my strengths. And so one of the coolest things about that experience was, going through that, you learned that despite what people say on the outside, you can still overcome that if you got what it takes on the inside, right? And so fast forward a few years, okay, even public speaking, right? My first public speaking experience, we did this talent show, and it was, I'm going to reveal my age right now, but it was Principal's Office by Young MC, and it was like a rap. And my line was supposed to be this long line. I don't want to go into the whole story of it, but basically I had to grab the microphone and just say, 12 o'clock comes with mass hysteria, everybody rushes to the cafeteria. And I get up there, so nervous. Finally, they get the microphone for my part, and I'm saying to myself, 12 o'clock, you got this, 12 o'clock. Comes to me, and I go, 12 o'clock. Freeze, right? So terrible at public speaking. You would never, maybe you can't tell, I get from a lot of people kudos on my public speaking skills, but the truth of the matter is it wasn't always easy, right? So high school years, I actually was a total beach bum. This is going to sound bad. I'm going to give you guys truth today, so some of it's going to sound bad. But in your high school, there's about 180 days in the calendar year, which means in one semester there's about 90 days. And I remember one of my semesters, I literally cut 27 days out of the 90 days. So I just, off to the beach, right? And so I had some problems in high school and actually ended up dropping out of high school. I come from a family of 8 kids, so a lot of kids running around. And at age 17, my mom actually kicked me out of the house because there's too many kids running around, financial capabilities, time to go on your own American way, right? And so my college career started out with one of my mentors at the time, okay? His life story was, he was from Vietnam, and he was passionate about English, okay? He loved English, and what he found out was if he had to leave Vietnam, then he could no longer speak he could no longer pursue his passion in English. He had to learn mathematics, right? So he learned mathematics. He came to the States grueling. He hated math. He wasn't good at math, right? How many people do you know? People who say, I hate math, or I'm not good at math, right? You guys heard that before? It comes all over the place. This was a guy who had that, and he overcame that, okay? Then when he got to the States, comes to Silicon Valley, okay? You can't do anything with math. It's all computer science, right? So what did he have to do? Not only does he hate math, but in order to get a job, provide for his family, he has to learn computer science, right? And he overcomes that. Not only did he learn math, he learned computer science too, right? So this was my mentor, and this is just some of the thinking that kind of helps you, right, along the way. So where I started out college years was, I was in it's probably like 500, 600 square feet, 2-bedroom apartment. There was 2 old Vietnamese couples, and I rented out a couch for $150 because I had to live off something like $400 a month to pay for school, to pay for food. I remember my monthly budget was like $62 a week. It sounds really bad, but when I went to college and like all the kids could afford to eat and all this stuff, I might buy a roll or something for a quarter, and that's what I'd eat for the day. So very challenging to come up, and it turned out to be a very good thing, right? Because when you're strapped for money, you're always looking for money. So I knew exactly where the financial aid office was. I knew early on that I had to apply for scholarships, I had to apply for grants. There was no free lunch, right? So if I could give you one piece of advice okay, one of the biggest problems in the Valley is, these are just the statistics for you, out of college graduates, after graduation, 72% will switch careers and go into some other field, okay? So imagine spending 4 years of your life going through college only to switch careers. On top of that, because of where we are with student loans, right, government picks up something like 55% of student loan debt. Students nowadays are graduating with $40,000, $100,000 in student loan debt, right? So this is a huge problem, a problem that you guys have to face, and there's a pretty simple way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. While you are in school, don't just be in school to get that degree. There's lots of internships, there's lots of opportunities to find out while you're in school what it is you actually like to do. Don't spend 4 years and say, great, I'm a chemical engineer, then discover that you hate chemical engineering, right? Look for those internships, pay your way through school, you'll graduate debt-free and know exactly what you want to do, and you'll have some experience to graduate with. So, okay, so I'm in De Anza College at this point. You know, I work 50, 60 hours a week, and you know, life was just busy, busy, busy. I don't know if you guys can relate to that or if anyone in this room has that kind of lifestyle, but I'd be cruising home on my bicycle because I didn't have a car at 11 o'clock at night, and I just remember I was a dreamer. I knew that I didn't know exactly what it looked like, but I knew that there were some cool things in life waiting for me if I just continued along this path. And I started getting some pay raises. I started working as a waiter, and my salary jumped from like $6 an hour to $18 an hour. For me, that was a huge deal. And around the time that we had our calculus final out at De Anza College, there were some extra hours open up, okay? And if you're strapped for cash, extra hours is a good thing. So I actually ended up missing my final and dropping out. And I remember the professor at De Anza College, he knew where I hung around, and so he went to my friends and he said, hey, go tell Scott to come back and come see me. And so what I thought was, well, if this professor cares enough to go to my friends and see, you know, that I wasn't there, I might as well give him the time of day and go visit him. So I don't remember anything. This became one of my mentors throughout school along the way too. But I don't remember exactly what that conversation entailed. But what I do remember was I had a new motivation to continue to go to college, and that there was something there for me. And so he actually allowed me to take the final, and because he had seniority, he went and kind of was able to change the grade based off of what my final grade was, even though the deadline had passed. So I continued on that road. So let me kind of back up the story a little bit. Back in high school, during my cutting, all these days, one of the physics teachers, he really shocked me because I was not your good student. I was not the one who you would encourage. But what he said is he said, if you did this well with just this amount of effort, imagine how good you could do if you actually gave it 100%. And so I wouldn't listen to any of the other teachers, but this one teacher, his name's George Schuttinger. I went to Piedmont Hills High School, and he had this project which planted the seed of engineering for me. Okay, it was the coolest thing in the world. It was signal processing for dummies. Okay, you had a microphone. It was connected to an oscilloscope, which turned on and off a laser pulse. Wireless across the room was a photocell, which caught the laser, went back through, sorry, not an oscilloscope, oscillator, back to the speakers. So I could speak into the microphone, and all the way across the room, I'm talking, okay, I don't want to reveal my age, but this is kind of long ago when wireless, before, cell phone technology and all this stuff. So it was really cool to me. And that was kind of my first introduction to signal processing, okay? So at that time, after De Anza, okay, I actually only applied to one school. I only applied to UC Berkeley because there was something called the IGETC at De Anza, which allowed you to have a good chance of getting into college. And I didn't even believe I would get in. But I did get in, okay? And when I first got to campus on UC Berkeley, I listened to an orientation speaker there, and he was this young kid, and he was giving this motivational speech to new coming students, and he said that he didn't think that he belonged at UC Berkeley. And he just listened to the encouragement and worked as hard as he can. And after this, he was actually graduating with a 4.0 from UC Berkeley, right? And so I remember all the kids were just talking and talking after that, all excited and happy to be there. And it just really hit me, that speech. And so I walked out onto the campus. The Berkeley layer has this little outlook. And I just leaned on the edge, and I just knew that I was where I was supposed to be. So UC Berkeley, this is my trip in UC Berkeley, is I always felt whenever I walked into a room that I was the stupidest person in the class, and that all the kids were much smarter than me. All the other people were better than me. They were more talented than me. And I just knew that if I was going to make it in the class, that I would have to work 4 times as hard as them. Okay? With the reading challenges, my philosophy was, well, I might have to take 7 times as long to read this thing, but guaranteed I will recall it and retain it better than anybody else. So it was a weakness, but it was also a strength, right? So I ended up working super hard. The longest I worked was in the computer lab. I actually did 48 hours without sleeping, trying to do some computer program. And I actually ended up graduating UC Berkeley. I had highest distinction, highest honors, Percy Lionel Davis Award for Excellence in Scholarship in Mathematics, and I just kicked butt, okay? And so you look at my life, and you look like, how could this drop out? How could this person who, isn't that quote-unquote student all of a sudden turn into this 4.0 student, okay? And I know a lot of you guys have this dream or this thought of what you want to do, and it looks like this huge statue, okay? So I'm going to paint a mental picture for you. Imagine there's this scale, right? And just imagine this huge, big statue on one side where it's just totally outweighed, right? Huge statue on one end. And what you have the capability on a day-to-day basis is you have a little pebble, a little rock that you can put on the other side of the scale. Boom. What's going to happen that first time you place that rock? It's useless, right? It's useless. Yes, it is useless. That day in, day out study is useless. That opening the book one day is useless. That doing your homework, okay, you could just sleep or you could do your homework. I saw somebody sleeping back there. Totally remember it. By the way, when somebody yawns, it's actually a good thing because a lot of times if you're challenging their brain, they'll yawn because the thought is challenging them and they're actually thinking really hard about it. So Anyways, so you have the capability to put another rock. What happens the second time you put the rock? Okay, nothing, right? Third time, every day. Now imagine you do it every day like clockwork. Okay, you're not the smartest, you're not the brightest, you're not anything else, but what you can do is you can put this little rock, because that's all you got. Okay? What happens after a year of that? There's 300 of these rocks. What happens after 5 years? And there's 1,500 of these rocks. Okay? So my point is that over time, it's not this, everybody thinks there's this big breakthrough that makes it for them. That's not the case. What really makes it is the day in, day out decision to put that little rock on that huge scale. And over 15, 20, 30 years, that little statue on the other side is nothing. So my first internship was at UC Berkeley, and I worked for USDA Forest Service, and I was worked in their IT department as a just in their IT department publishing papers to do a web page, right? So every month publications would come out, and what I did was I said, this is a waste of time. I spent 2 weeks doing this. Why not write a script to figure out how to do this? Okay, at this time, I had taken some classes like Intro to C++. I didn't know anything about C++. Back when I was a waiter, I would go to the library, and I would open this engineering book, and it said integrated circuits. I didn't know what that was, but the diagrams looked cool, and I said, someday I will know what that is, okay? And so anyways, I wrote this script and figured out how to do in 15 minutes what it took 2 weeks to do, okay? That was kind of my first introduction to engineering, okay? Continued to do internships. When I graduated UC Berkeley, speaking of women in engineering, I just want to hit on that because there are some personal kind of racism things that I had to overcome. And I remember thinking, I won't put it flat out exactly what I was thinking, but I would say I would be upset because other students would come in with a laptop and they'd have their life set for them and they wouldn't put in the effort. And here I was, I'm a computer science, I was an electrical engineering computer science minor, mathematics major, and I couldn't even afford a computer till my last semester at Berkeley. So it's just interesting some of the things that you have to go through in terms of seeing maybe white males or seeing that you're different, and sometimes you can kind of blame on those things. But what I want to say is whenever you face those challenges and those heartaches, what should keep you motivated and keep you going is remembering that it's not just about you. There are several people who are going to follow in your footsteps. If you're the first one to make this journey or make that path, if you're the first woman in that engineering department, if you're the first this, if you're the first that, there's tons of people who you're paving the way for. And just always remember that. That is something that I used to think about. And the harder times, why do I have to be the first? Why am I the only person who blah, 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 right? So I think I got off track. So senior at Berkeley, I'm applying for graduate school, and I wrote about this. This was the problem that fascinated me, okay? It was the Washington, D.C. Fingerprint compression standard, okay? There was a mile, like an acre warehouse, like mile longs of file cabinets full of fingerprints, because criminals, unfortunately, when they break the law, they don't just break it once, they break it a couple times. So there's like 20 copies of the same individual who's gotten fingerprinted over and over. So there's a lot of redundancy and a lot of copies of the same fingerprints, and they have no way to consolidate this thing. So the plan was to somehow digitize all of these fingerprints so that they can have them in a database, they can clean it up, they wouldn't need all this storage space, and they could find files as criminals were coming in, so kind of real-time detection. And I wrote about this problem, and when I got accepted into graduate school, I actually ended up working with one of the 3 people at Los Alamos who wrote the FBI fingerprint compression standard. So this was a huge deal for me. At this time, I was already used to grant writing, scholarship writing, and fellowship writing, okay? And here's what my fellowship writing looked like, is when I applied for graduate school funding. Okay, by the way, if you guys go to graduate school in the field of mathematics or electrical engineering, computer science, mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, they'll probably pay you to go to grad school. So I don't know if you guys know that, but you can get what's called a research assistantship, and you should get something like, you know, between 30 to 40,000 getting paid to sharpen your skills and go to graduate school. Okay? If you have any questions, hopefully my information will be passed out. My phone is open anytime. If you have any questions about different things, funding sources, feel free to email me, contact me anytime. That's just how I roll, I guess. So when I was applying for graduate school funding, my first application, I had a lot of writing challenges, so I had to go to a mentor who would review and critique, and the whole page was red of all the things I did wrong on my application. So I'd have to go back, and it was all red again. And so there was a lot of work to pull this application together. And I applied for my first funding, and I'm all excited about it, and I get a no, right? So I start over, and I do it again. No. Do it a third time. Apply a third time for funding. No. Okay, we're no longer talking about $1,000, $2,000, $5,000. We're talking about big money, $40,000 to $100,000 of grant money that I'm applying for now, right? So big applications, lots of competition. Fourth no, fifth no, sixth no, seventh no, eighth no, ninth no, 10th no. 11th time I'm applying. And see, what you have to remember about failure is sometimes your end all is not the end all that you're trying to think for. So most people would get frustrated, but what I knew is that I could get as many no's as I wanted, but when I was learning to do those applications, in life, when it came time to maybe do a project proposal, my project proposal was going to take into account the things that I learned from these applications. So I did care a lot whether I got the money or not, but I knew that even in my failures, I was getting stronger and better. So I didn't mind as much. It was not just the money that was important. It was, how do I get stronger? How do I become a better individual that will provide more value to the companies that I work for? Okay? So 11th time, I think it's National Science Foundation, NSF, says honorable mention. Okay? Honorable mention is like the worst thing you can get, because it says, you did a good job, but we're not going to give you any money. Okay? So I'm like, okay, 11th time. Fourth time, Ford Foundation says yes. Okay? $75,000, being able to use 3 years over a 5-year period, which means I could not accept the money certain years and then accept the money other years. Okay? Then with this Los Alamos project, okay, I was the first student at New Mexico State University to bring in money as a principal investigator into all of New Mexico State University, which is where I did my PhD. Okay, so $105,000 over 2 years, and a conglomeration with University of California and Los Alamos National Labs, with one of the 3 people who wrote the FBI fingerprint compression standard, which was a really cool project that I worked on. So continued in grad school, continued to do internships and find different projects. I also worked with ITT Corporation. ITT Corporation, they used the algorithm for chemical detection. So what they were using is they had these level 4 lasers that would shoot at material. It would return back this Raman spectra, and from that signature, you try to figure out what chemical it was. So this was a part of a signal processing problem, but it was an algorithm to detect what type of chemical it was. Okay, so continued along the story. Graduated from New Mexico State. Went through several other different companies, internships, programs, and today what I work at is eBay, and I do 2 parts to my current job. The first part is test automation. Okay, so I was always drawn to, how do I make things more efficient? How do I make more things optimal? I actually don't like math at all. I think math and engineering is boring, but I think what you can do with math and engineering is super cool and super awesome. So I do test automation, which allows us to automate different parts of the site and go through different buying and selling flows to find out errors or bugs there. Okay. The second part of what I do is I help to make eBay accessible for blind users. Okay. So in terms of the internet, what my vision for is the internet is only a visual kind of feedback and representation, right? There's not a whole lot of talking to your computer or listening to your computer. And if we can improve, it's actually not that far off with the speech recognition, but if we can improve the technologies around the internet, what I envision for eBay is imagine your phone's in the right side of your car, right? I just came back from Puerto Rico, and I was 3 minutes late to one flight, and I dropped one of my Sambas Adidas shoes. And I love my Sambas. Those things are so comfy, right? And so I come back here, but imagine on the way home from the airport, my phone's in the right side of my car, and I say, shop black Sambas. What size would you like? The phone talks back to you, and I say, 11 and a half. They say, where would you like to ship it? My home address. Boom, done, right? Imagine that's our internet world where we can talk, right? So that's kind of my story. Hopefully I kept within a little bit of the time frame. Hopefully I threw out enough for you. My goal, like I said, was to try to connect the dots for you, especially if you're in this place where I don't know what I want to do with my future. I don't know how you get there. I don't know how you get into the company for the first time, those kind of things. So thank you for your time.
Can you write your email?
Sure.
Scott, I never heard of a grad student going to the university with their own funding. You know, usually students go, here I am, what do you got for me? And you showed up
Yeah.
saying, here I am, and I have all this money, and that's amazing. You're fearless.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just fearless. Like, I can't believe it. Pretty amazing.
Thank you.
Amit. Okay, and you guys, if you have questions, you know, for anyone or Scott, you know, just go ahead and ask. And Amit, I think you're gonna just, you know how to set up and everything.
Yeah, I
or-
think as long as I have a.
Yeah, we're good. I probably should have turned off the projector.